So, Namaskar, everybody.
Namaskar. Namaskar.
Welcome to Vistara Circle. As you know, here at Vistara Circle, we have collective meditation in Alexandria, Virginia. We meet at Kingstown Library. And we have kirtan as well. So we just finished our kirtan. We did our silent meditation. We also usually have a yoga class. But for these next few weeks, we're doing this special series on the chakras. So then we're using the time to talk about a different chakra every evening, every Monday night. So welcome and thank you for joining us, those of you on Facebook and on YouTube. And if there's a question from somebody out there on Facebook and YouTube, we can go ahead and take a question from there as well. So please feel free to comment or ask any questions. So tonight we are discussing the Manipura Chakra. We are at the third chakra. And the Manipura Chakra is located right over here in the area of the navel. Okay? If you, actually, right now, if you go ahead and if you were to put your hand on there, you can if you want to. I mean under the shirt, if you did that, you'd find that it is very, very hot. Right? Have you noticed that your belly is very, very hot? Mm-hmm. It's one of the, I think it's the warmest part of the body. And that makes a lot of sense with this tantric interpretation of the Manipura Chakra, because this is the chakra of fire. This is the chakra that controls the luminous factor of the universe. So we've been talking about this already, how each chakra controls a different factor that we find in the universe, and a different factor that we find within ourselves. So for example, in the universe there are solids, right? In like rocks and different animals and people. So just like inside of us, there's also solids, like we have our bones, we have our skin, our body. So that is controlled by the Manipura Chakra. The Manipura Chakra controls the solid factor, as we mentioned. And then, does anybody remember what the Svadhisthana Chakra controls? The second chakra, what factor does that one control?
The liquid.
The liquid factor, absolutely. So the Svadhisthana Chakra controls, your any liquids in the body. The body's made up of water, like over 80% water, your blood, your lymph. Any liquid at all in the body is controlled by the Svadhisthana Chakra. And so what does the Manipura Chakra control? It controls the luminous factor. And of course, we see light in the universe, right? Just think of the sun, think of the stars, think of the light right now that's in this room. Just like there's light in the universe, there's also light inside of us. We also have a luminous factor. And the way that we sort of experience that light inside of us is through heat, is through temperature. So in this abdominal area here, where our digestion takes place, it's very, very hot. Without that heat, we couldn't even process the food that you have. So, so then this chakra controls then also your digestive system. It controls the luminous factor, the digestive system. And let's talk about now the basic characteristics of the chakra. So for example, as you can see here on your page, that this chakra, the shape is a triangle. It is a triangle and the color is red, crimson red, which matches this idea of fire. And the element, we talked about the factor that it controls, but the element is obviously fire. And it has 10 petals. So we started with the Muladhara Chakra. Does anybody remember how many petals that one has? 4. And the Svadhisthana Chakra? 6 petals, yes. And so the Manipura Chakra has 10 petals. And now that becomes very significant, and that's what we're going to focus our discussion on tonight, is going over what each of these petals mean. Because as we've mentioned before, that these chakras are kind of like clusters of emotions. So therefore, in each petal, actually, each petal is supposed to hold a different propensity that we have as human beings, a different emotion. So then the spectrum of our human emotions can be viewed through the chakras. All right. So in this Manipura chakra, there are 10 of them. Here in the Anahata chakra, in the heart chakra, there are 12, and in the Vishuddha, there are 16. So as you can see, it's a whole range. And then when you count the Ajnana chakra, there are 2. That's a total of 50 right there. So those are 50 emotions that we sort of have in our human palette. In our human palette of emotions, or our human spectrum of emotions. So so then these 10 emotions, we'll talk about them. And before we talk about those, let's also think about this chakra in a different way. Think about the chakras so far in a different way that we haven't introduced before. So in our tantric philosophy, there's also the concept of the 3 gunas. Okay? The 3 gunas are sort of like these binding principles. Okay? In other words, they are binding principles that you will find in every aspect of the universe. Where do they come from? They come from the concept of Prakriti and Purusha, or Shiva and Shakti. You might have heard of these terms, Shiva and Shakti. Shiva or Purusha means consciousness. Shakti or Prakriti means energy. And what are these two? I'm going to put them on this piece of paper. So, for example, let's say Shiva here and Shakti here, okay, or Purusha and Prakriti. These two make up one thing, like this piece of paper. These two sides make up one, and that one thing is Brahma. That one thing is supreme consciousness. So actually, in our philosophy, these ancient yogis have found a way to understand God as being made up of 2 parts, or understand supreme consciousness as being made up of 2 parts, energy and consciousness. And it's a lot like us. For example, right now you are listening to what I'm saying, so you are aware. You're like consciousness. I'm sorry. No. When you listen to me, you're being energy because you're doing something, right? Listening is something that you actively do. But can't you also observe yourself listen to me right now? Like right now I'm talking to you, so I'm doing something, but I'm also observing that I'm talking to you. So I'm both consciousness, I'm observing, and I'm also energy, I'm talking. So just like we are a combination of consciousness and energy all the time, that supreme consciousness has also been viewed in that way. All right, and what are we? We are reflections of that supreme consciousness. So that's why it shouldn't surprise us that we have those characteristics as well. Okay? And so these 3 gunas now come into play with the word Prakriti and Shakti. So consciousness, right, Shiva or Purusha, just is. It's just observing. It's the aspect of supreme consciousness that is just sort of exists and observes everything. But when supreme consciousness wants to do something, like when the supreme consciousness now wants to, let's say, create the world, or create you, or do something, or make the sun rise. So now it's not just observing, now it is doing something. So these 3 gunas break down that principle of Shakti or Prakriti. So Prakriti or energy or Shakti, however you want to call it, can be broken down into 3 binding principles. And those 3 binding principles are, so you can write these down if you'd like. The first one is Sattva Guna. That's S-A-T-T-V-A Guna. The second one is Raja Guna. That's R-A-J-O and then Guna. And the third one is Tamaguna. That's T-A-M-O Guna. So these 3 are sort of like the breakdown of Prakriti or Shakti, the breakdown of energy. Okay? And basically, the Sattva Guna means it's like, so these 3 forces then, they are basically, there's different degrees to them of subtlety. So the most subtle one is the Sattva Guna. So Sattva means sentient. And then the most mutative or active one is Raja Guna. And then the most crude one, okay, is Tamaguna. So then, so the one that is nicer for us, and nicer in general, we could say is Sattva Guna. Anything that is considered sattvic. Okay? Something that is considered Rajaguna or Rajasic is something that is very busy, very active. And something that is considered Tamasic or is a part of Tamaguna is something that is very crude or static. And so then it means that as Shakti creates things, as energy moves, it is always going to break down in any one of, it's going to appear as any one of these three energy forms, any one of these three principles. So, for example, some things in the universe are more sentient. Other things are more Rajasic. Other things are more Tamasic. Like food. Let's look at it in the category of food. So if we think of the very crude and heavy food, that would be in the category of Tamaguna. Foods like meat, foods like alcohol, any intoxicants, those things that you would put in the body, those are very more crude than, say, like a grape or, say, like a tomato. Although some people might be very adverse to tomatoes. But so then you see, even in food, we can see the representation of tamasic foods, rajasic foods, and sattvic foods. In fact, here at Vistara Circle, we have a potluck after this, and we always ask people to just bring sattvic food. So we ask people to avoid these tamasic ingredients. Okay? So the reason I mention this is because everything in the universe can either be called tamasic, Rajasic, or Sattvic, or can have some sort of combination of the two, but one principle is going to prevail. Like, for example, let's take a look at a very tamasic environment, like a prison. A prison, where people are, are encaged and maybe tortured or suffering. That's a tamasic environment. When you go inside the prison, you might feel that energy. Ooh, this is like heavy energy. I don't want to be here. The walls are very hard and people are unhappy. So there's that tamaguna kind of permeating, let's say, a prison. But in different pockets of the prison, we will find things that are sattvic. Like in one room, there might be somebody who just became religious, let's say, or somebody that's serving somebody else, or somebody that's doing something constructive or something kind. So there we see some elements of sattva guna. So, but overall, that place might be called tamasic. Okay? So the reason I'm bringing up these three gunas is because these chakras also fall in those categories. And I just want to put this into context in that way. So the two lower chakras, the Muladhara chakra and the Svadhisthana chakra, do you remember the characteristics we talked about last week about the Svadhisthana chakra? It was very, what? Crude, right? Very, even reptilian, right? For example, what were the vrittis there? Does anybody remember some of them?
Disempowerment, belittlement of others.
Belittlement of others, nasty stuff. Cruelty. What else was there? Indulgence. Indulgence can be very crude.
Total annihilation.
Yes, thoughts of sure annihilation of something. Okay.
It has to do more with survival, creation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it could be paired
Lower
with
chakras.
Survival. The Svadhisthana chakra, the second chakra.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Cruelty, okay, kind of like all of the characteristics that we see in reptiles. That, like a snake will eat, for example, its own eggs. It'll eat its own offspring. I mean, how more cruel can a being get? So those are the characteristics we find in the Svadhisthana chakra. And so then those two chakras are kind of like, they're under the category of tamaguna. And so then, and now we're at the third chakra. So this one here, and one more thing I'll say is that you'll notice, in fact, tonight we're going to start paying attention to this. The higher we go up the chakras, the higher we go, the more subtle the chakra is. So the lower the chakras are, the more dense and crude the propensities are, the emotions. But the higher that we will go up the chakras, and we look at the petals, by the way, the name for that is vritti. It's V-R-T-T-I. So we're going to look at the vrittis, right? Another word for these emotions and these petals. The higher we go in the chakras, you'll see that they get more subtle in nature. And so this chakra now, being the third one, is now in the category of Rajaguna. So it has a lot of Rajasic energy. So that's kind of how I want to introduce this chakra before we talk about the Britis, is as an expression of Rajaguna. And what is Rajaguna? Rajaguna is anything that is active, anything that is has a lot of sort of activity. Okay, so let's bring that into the context of food. So the sattvic foods, are foods like vegetables, like fruits. Can anybody guess what might be some rajasic foods? If it's supposed to be very active and kind of stimulating?
Sugar.
Coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee is a good example. Okay.
Grapes?
There's nervous system, right?
Maybe.
Well, grapes because it's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, sugar has some rajasic element to it, right? But the main foods that I'm thinking of are like coffee. Coffee is definitely rajasic, right? When you drink coffee, bzz, you're like buzzed. You're kind of buzzing around. Also chocolate. Okay. So chocolate is also rajasic. Some spicy foods could be considered rajasic.
Black tea.
Yes, some
Or
black
some
tea.
other teas.
Some black tea that might have,
Mate. Caffeine.
yeah, maybe mate. Okay, and things with caffeine. So, okay, so then this chakra then is a rajasic chakra. It is full of activity. Hence the fact that it represents light and it represents fire. You ever heard somebody say, "Oh man, tonight while you were dancing, you were on fire." Okay? Or tonight while I was, I'm on fire tonight, like I'm ready to go, right? My engine has started. I'm ready to cruise.
It's lit.
It's lit. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good way to. Yeah, we have different sort of generations here. That it's lit term is like past my. Anyways, so it's real lit. Okay, so the Manipura Chakra is lit, without a doubt, and it represents that fiery energy. So we human beings have that as a characteristic to ourselves, as we've just pointed out. And also, we've talked about the chakras in so many different narratives, right? So many different contexts. That's what's actually beautiful about these chakras, is that they represent the human condition in general, and there can be many narratives to understand them. So one narrative that we were using was how these chakras represent the spiritual journey that a spiritual seeker goes on. When you first think, I think I want to practice meditation, or I think I want to be more spiritual, that is sort of represented in the first chakra. Because for many different reasons, one of the britis there is actually spiritual longing, which is called moksha. So that propensity is down there. Anyway, also dharma is down there. It's one of the petals down there. Dharma means like your sort of purpose in life. So when we decide to become more spiritual or to practice meditation, we are sort of in this Muladhara chakra ready to go on that journey, because the spiritual path is a journey. It is a journey to your higher self. It's not like in religion, where, for example, in religion they might say, okay, do you believe this? You do? Okay, you're going to heaven. Good job. Do you accept, for example, Jesus Christ into your heart? You do? Okay, you're saved. We're done. You can go home. Everything's cool now. It seems like a package that's just sort of quick and easy. But the spiritual path is different. The spiritual path it's like you are kind of cooking yourself. It's like, pasta. Before you put pasta into the hot water, what does it feel like? It's hard, it's crude. But when you dump the pasta and you time it for 9 minutes and the water is boiled already, right? The conditions already, the water is boiled, you put the pasta in there, what happens to the pasta?
It turns up.
It gets soft. It gets more subtle. Now you can eat it. Now it's delicious. The spiritual journey is just like that. First, we start in a very crude way. But as we do more meditation, as we do more spiritual practice, we get sort of softer, like that pasta, until we become more subtle. And so each chakra, and so the spiritual journey then is represented by the Kundalini, which we talked about also the first day, is that spiritual energy. And that energy rises from one chakra to the next, to the next, to the next by way of saying the mantra. The more you repeat the mantra, the more subtle your mind becomes, the higher this kundalini travels. Your consciousness kind of gets more subtle. The more meditation you do, you're kind of going up the chakras, because each chakra is more subtle every step of the way, right? Okay, so thinking about it in terms of the journey, I was just trying to recap all of that. Thinking about it in terms of that journey, so the first step then is kind of like how, a question to define that is kind of like, how can I best fulfill my purpose? Okay? And then, and then we talked about, that's the beginning of the journey. Then we get to the second chakra, where we're talking about, it represents water and liquids. So we talked about how that could be like a cleansing, almost like a baptism, that after you decide to go on this spiritual journey, then you might go through a process of cleansing. You might say, for example, I don't think I should drink so much, because when I drink, I can't meditate quite as well the next morning. Or, I remember I used to smoke. And the more spiritual that I got, the more meditation that I did, I just very naturally just stopped. I didn't need to have a formal quitting or a talk. It's just something that I didn't feel any need to do. And we kind of become a little more self-reliant and more subtle in our behavior and the things we include in our body. Like a lot of people that I hear that come to meditation, they say, yeah, I've been making a lot of changes with my life. I've been blocking out some negative influences in my life. Some people even say, I'm not using Facebook as much. I feel like that energy kind of invades my focus. And so you sort of block out things that kind of hinder you. You do that when you get on a spiritual path. And so that's the energy of the second chakra, becoming fluid, sort of cleansing. So now we're at the third chakra. And so it has this rajasic energy that we were talking about, this very active energy. And so a central question here might be, how can I'll phrase it as, how can I take action? How is it that I can, what can I do now in order to fulfill my goal? Okay, so it's like we started with a desire, then we kind of become more determined, and then now we kind of there's moments in life where we have to take action. And so whenever we do anything active, it represents, the energy of this chakra. Okay? And we did actually a retreat not too long ago, a few weeks ago, where it was on the chakras. And we had a workshop there, and one of our teachers, Dada V, he talked about this Manipura Chakra. And he said that this Manipura Chakra also represents kind of like, very decisive energy. Moments where we have to act without thinking too much, right? So maybe you can relate to something like that. Like a time where you had to take, sudden action without too much thought, or just sort of blind action, like, somebody who might be procrastinating going to the gym. So, I'll go tomorrow. Or when you get to the gym, you're not inspired. You look around and you don't feel like lifting anything. You don't feel like getting on a treadmill. But when you finally just do it, right? And you just start, and then what happens at the end? How do you feel?
Amazing.
You might feel really good. Okay, I'm trying to go to Zumba class tonight, but I'm not really feeling up to it. So you have this sort of static energy. Finally, you allow yourself to go into the rajasic energy. Okay, I'll just take action and do it. And then boom, you feel great afterward, right? Can anybody relate to that? Maybe after an awesome Zumba class? I've never taken a Zumba class. Anybody here have?
Yeah.
Don't you feel awesome after that?
Yes.
Okay. So, or sometimes, if you go out dancing, I'm saying that because we have some dancers in the room. Maybe you're like, tonight I don't feel like dancing, but I'll just go anyway. And then you get there and you start dancing, and then it feels great. So that moment where we become more active and we take a decisive action is kind of like the spirit of this chakra. Okay? So
it requires discipline.
It requires
like,
discipline?
Just like do something you don't want to do. That you don't feel like doing right now. Where you're just like, okay, I'm gonna just do it, you know. It requires discipline.
You're helping us, this is a good segue, into now talking about the vrittis, the different petals, what each of these propensities mean. Okay? So, it's good that we said the good first. We talked about the beautiful metaphor of the spiritual journey and how this chakra represents activity and fire, and it can jazz us up. Okay, that's sort of a nice way of thinking about this. But now we're going to go into the vrittis, and the vrittis, similar to the Svadhisthana chakra, are also still a little crude. They are not our most shining moment in our emotional palette, in our emotional selves. Hold that thought with what you said about staticity, like being sort of lazy. Hold that thought. That's one of these vrittis, actually. All right. Now, one quick thing before we sort of intellectualize it too much. The meaning of Svadhisthana is at the bottom here, that definition. It means the treasure house of the devotee. So that's what it means in Sanskrit. Now, let's connect with this chakra before we go any further. Go ahead, please, and sit for meditation as best as you can. And before we do this exercise, let's go over the root sound. We didn't cover that. Each of these chakras has a root sound, an acoustic root sound, that sort of controls the chakra. And then each of the petals also has its own sound. Okay, the sounds of the vrittis. I haven't labeled them here. We can go over them if you'd like. But right now, let's go ahead and just talk about the root sound of the whole chakra. Okay, so when you say this sound, it has an effect on the chakra. It kind of allows it to vibrate and to open and to appear. So we'll try, it says it's spelled R-A-M, rum, but it is pronounced rung. So kind of like lung, but instead of an L, an R. So rung, rung, okay? And you elongate the last part, like rung. You hold out the last part, okay? I don't know if just in saying that you felt something here. I actually did. But we're going to tap into that now. So let's take a moment to connect with this chakra kind of psychically through a little meditation. So let's just close the eyes. And let's bring the mind to the navel area of the body. And go ahead and visualize this chakra there in the navel area, inside the body, as a red triangle. And so let's just take 3 deep breaths. Each time trying to visualize the chakra more clearly as a red triangle. And now let's visualize that it is sitting basically on top of a flower that has 10 petals. So go ahead now and visualize the 10 petals of this chakra in another 3 breaths. For now, you can just imagine that everything here is red, the color of the chakra. And now bring your attention to, let's say, the nucleus of the chakra, the nucleus of the triangle, a point in the middle of it. And as we say the root sound of the chakra, which is rung, as we say that, imagine that you are vibrating the chakra, and especially that central point. So let's try saying its acoustic sound 3 times, trying to connect with our Manipura Chakra. Rong. 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 So we can open the eyes. Did anybody feel anything in that part of the body as you were?
Like a vibration, straight from my voice to that point.
To this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a vibration.
Okay. I find out of all the chakras, this is one of the easiest to feel somewhat physically. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the different emotions. And you know, another way we could have visualized this nicely, and you can do this at home, is you can just visualize fire here. You can visualize the chakra, like the inside of the chakra as just like a flame or like a fire that is burning. And you know, it's interesting, we'll talk about the Anahata Chakra next week, but the Anahata Chakra, the color is green, but it is greenish gray. And the reason why it is greenish gray, that gray is supposed to be from the smoke of this chakra. So this chakra is so hot that the sort of like smoke sort of rises and actually touches the Anahata Chakra. So that's why the color of the Anahata Chakra is greenish gray.
That's why they call it heartburn.
That's why they call it heartburn? Okay. Actually, that is, we'll talk about that. Hold that thought too. Okay. So then this Manipura Chakra, so it's nice that we got to connect with it a little bit. All right. And now we're going to sort of understand it more intellectually by going over the different vrittis. So let's start with Laja. We'll start with Laja. And Laja means shame. So we can go ahead and write that down. It means shyness or shame. And so this is actually, I think it's a pretty predominant emotion that human beings experience. I think this chakra is also, it's a main characteristic of this chakra. You know, think about shame and shyness. Some of you here have some children who are babies. You know, a child, when they're like 1 or 2 years old, they can walk down the street naked. They don't care. They have no shame. You know, you could pick them up and they could urinate on you. Like, with no...
In front of everyone.
In front of everyone. With no shame whatsoever. So, so you see, then it means something. It means that shyness or shame is a learned reaction, is a learned emotion. At some point, we learned to feel shame and shyness. But as much as it was learned, it's also built in. It's built in because we find it as one of the vrittis of this chakra. Okay? So actually, different hormonal imbalances also can cause excessive shame, excessive shyness, and things like that. So, you know, we talked about before how the asanas, the yoga postures, they work these chakras. You know, we talked about how in different ways that you move the body. Like, for example, an asana for this Manipura Chakra is to do the bow pose. The bow pose is when let's say you're lying flat on the floor, and you lift, you're lying on your stomach, flat on the floor. You grab your ankles, you lift the ankles, and you lift the chest. So you're kind of like a bow. You're kind of like rocking on your abdominal area. So when you're doing that, you're kind of like pressurizing or depressurizing this glandular area. Okay, these adrenal glands, the glands that are here, there's many. And so you're kind of pressurizing them or sometimes depressurizing them depending on what asana you're doing. And so you are allowing for those hormones to secrete properly, okay, to have more secretion or to have balanced secretion. So doing the bow pose or doing any asanas that help the Manipura Chakra or strengthen it will help you to overcome shame and shyness. All right? And I feel like there's a lot to say about shame and shyness in general. Shyness is one of the things that blocks us in life. A lot of times people say, I teach, and sometimes I ask my students to describe themselves in 3 words, like in the beginning of a semester. And I find many students say, I'm nice, I'm helpful, and I'm shy. Shy is something that a lot of people label themselves as that. And, it just kind of means something. It means like, I'm not outgoing. I worry too much about what people think, it's like a block that you might have on yourself. So yes, and a lot of times we feel that because there might be some sort of hormonal imbalance, or this chakra is weak. Okay, so then that's one of the vrittis here. I think we'll come back to this topic, but we can go on now to another one. The next one, we'll go down the list here, is Pishunata. Pishunata means sadistic tendency. So now we can also bring out another narrative. We talked about how the Svadhisthana chakra contains a lot of the emotions that are the most similar to reptiles, right? And so the very reptilian emotions, like some human beings are very reptilian. They don't care. They're so cruel. I can think of many world leaders. For example, Brazil just elected a president. His name is Bolsonaro, and he is someone who has been described as very, very crude, very, very extremely cruel. I saw an interview with him where he said the only thing that was wrong with the 1980s, where there was the military dictatorships in Latin America. Latin America had many military coups, and Brazil was one of those countries that had several military dictators who took power and killed people. And he said the only thing that was wrong about that period was that they didn't kill enough people. So he makes statements like that on television, and he completely anti-gay, and so very, very ultra-right. And so that's somebody who is very, very cruel, very, very crude. We see human beings like that. So that represents the Svadhisthana chakra. Now we're at the Manipura chakra. And so we just see a vritti that's also kind of weird, or not weird, but is also something kind of crude. What did we say? Pishunata, sadistic tendency. Okay? So sadistic tendency, in other words, why do we have people who are sadistic in our society? Why do we have people who, torture animals? People who murder people, who do things in such a sadistic way? Because it's one of our natural human characteristics. And it comes from the aspect of ourselves. We share that characteristic with animals. So if the Svadhisthana chakra was reptilian, the Manipura chakra is sort of like, is there a word, mammalian? It's like the qualities of a mammal, the qualities of an animal. So we might see a tiger have sadistic tendency. We might see a lion when it's hunting. It's just going to dig its claws in, it's going to tear the flesh in a very sadistic way. So those elements of life, of animal life, of human life, because we share many qualities with animals, that would be one of them, is found here in this chakra. Sometimes children exhibit sadistic tendency, like teenagers. Teenagers exhibit, sometimes at the age of 13 to 15, there are some children that are antisocial. They don't mix well. They might hurt animals, etc. Supposedly, you can identify those qualities because there's a hormonal imbalance, and you might find that children who are like that, they have lower sort of hormonal secretion of the sex, of sort of like sexual hormones. So there's less secretion of that. There could be even less pubic hair, like they're slower to grow underarm hair, pubic hair. If you see that in a child, in a growing young person, it's an imbalance of these chakras, it's an imbalance of the hormones, and those create, it doesn't let that person mature. And on the other hand, when you do go through puberty in a healthy way, and these sexual hormones and glands sort of kick in, it helps you to connect with people better. You know, we might automatically assume, ooh, that's going to make that person sexual. Actually, no. At first, it makes you just sort of easier to connect with another human being. So there's sort of some base attributes to these sexual feelings and desires. But if that's not maturing in a person, then not only are they not sort of sexually maturing, they're also not socially maturing. They're not connecting well and empathizing and caring. So that's why you might see sadistic tendency. So, so then this chakra, if it's weak, it means that the glands here in a teenager are not developing as well, and you know, and so they are, and so you might see these characteristics. So actually, it's very healthy to have pubic hair. A lot of, you know, in our culture, women, they shave their armpits, but that's not, yogis don't recommend that. You know, of course you can do that if you like, but yogis don't recommend that because that, you know, those hairs are there for a reason. They are biologically there to help you to release heat. You know, if you stifle, you know, that's why sweat comes through there, smell comes through there. But if you cut the hair, then the heat can't come out as easily, you know, through the pores. So, anyways, but so then, and so we need to have those things are natural. You know, they help us actually for proper hormonal balance. So okay, so then we're making connections to, actually it's very good if we learn about biology. As a yogi and as a meditator, the more familiar you are with biology and science, especially anatomy, the more effective you can be in your meditation. Okay, and to understand some of these concepts as well. So let's go on now to another one, Irsha. Irsha means envy. Okay, so that one is jealousy. I think that's a very common human characteristic, right? I see somebody who just got a promotion. I see somebody just bought a new car. You know, whether we want to or not, sometimes, you know, a little bit of envy pops out. You know, at least the thoughts are there or the feeling is there. So, you know, today, anyways, I'm going to talk about that when I get to Girna. But for now, in Irsha, that's where we see envy. So that's here in this chakra. That's sort of another sort of animal characteristic. I can't think of an example right now from the animal world. But any thoughts on Irsha? Because another thing we want to do as we go through this is we want to talk about the good side of why this is here. Okay? Because these vrittis, yes, they express some ugly things, but they also, like, let's just take sadistic tendency. I mean, you know, one way that I thought about sadistic tendency is like, let's say flowers, okay? When I have some fresh flowers in my hand, I have to cut the stem. When I want to put it in water, I have to cut the stem so that the stem is open at the bottom. I can put it in water and then the flower will get the water. It'll go up through its vine. But if it's closed, it like seals off like it's, I don't know what to call it, like it's pores, and then water can't really get up to the flower anymore. So you see, just the act of taking a beautiful flower and chopping the bottom of it, it seems sadistic because it is a flower that we're chopping. But why are we doing it? We're doing it to save it. We're doing, as soon as we chop it, then we put it in the vase. And now it'll bloom and now it'll last longer. Everybody understand what I'm saying? So I'm just trying to say that some sadistic tendency is good for something. Like it could be good for chopping the stem of a flower.
Like if you're getting attacked by a snake, so then you have to defend yourself, and it might be sadistic, like in one context. But if you're defending yourself than
Yes,
or
absolutely.
someone you love.
Absolutely. If you have to defend yourself in a way that is sort of, you have to actually, let's say, kill something or kill somebody, yeah, that's an expression of sadistic tendency. Okay, but you're doing it for self-preservation. You're doing it to defend yourself. Okay, think of when a bee stings you. A bee will sting you, in a very sadistic way. It doesn't care if you're 3 years old. It doesn't care if you're, 7 years. You ever been stung as a child? But why is it doing it? To defend itself. So, because it's natural to defend ourselves. And so, yeah, we might use this vritti sometimes to defend ourselves. Okay? And then, of course, we just see this in general. Like, think of, the military dictators. Think of people like Stalin, people like Hitler. These human beings, they're kind of like animals, or worse than animals. They killed millions and millions of people. Why? Because there's this sadistic tendency, but also because they're very much in this chakra. This Manipura Chakra is all about action. And sometimes action can be blind. Sometimes action can take place with no heart. Like somebody like Stalin and Hitler, or even some of the leaders we see today. Obviously, they've come a long way. Oh my goodness, what amazing work. You became president. You became the leader of a nation. Wow, you did a lot of good work. But a lot of heartless work. So you see, that's where the Anahata Chakra will come into play. You see what I mean? When we take action, but we don't use any heart, we don't have any compassion, then we can do really destructive things. Like you can be very active, a lot of Rajasic energy, become president. But if when you're president, now you want to, separate children from their parents, and put them in detention centers. And so, yeah, that's a lot of work you're doing, a lot of sort of Manipura action, but there's no heart there. How could you do that to these children? How could you murder all these people? So it's very easy for people to be stuck in this chakra. They just cannot advance. They don't put any love or care. And we see all ranges of people be in this chakra, from just people on the streets who might be cruel and sadistic, to presidents like Trump, who did with this, holding the families at the border and not caring, So, okay, so then there's Irsha, that's envy. Now we're going to come back to what Alejandro was saying, susupati, which means staticity, sleepiness, or laziness. Okay? So static energy, being lazy, being sleepy. Have you ever felt that?
Is it inertia?
Yeah. Something like inertia. So sometimes I experience this in the morning. I wake up and I don't quite want to get out of bed yet. Okay? So that is sort of that is susupati, sleepiness, laziness. I want to meditate, but right now I'm feeling a little lazy, a little sleepy. I'm sort of in this funk. Okay? I'm sort of, I can't move so well. I don't want to move. It's like, when mom was like, come on, we have to go. And the kids are like, Mom, I don't want to go anywhere, right? That's sort of this vritti, okay? Which is interesting because this is the vritti, the chakra as a whole, we already said, metaphorically represents something totally different. It represents energy. So, but at the same time, it's appropriate that vritti would be here, because what is the opposite of laziness? Determination, activity. And this is the chakra of that Rajasic energy, that activity. Okay? So then someone could be in this vritti if they are very lazy, just like somebody could be in this chakra very much if they're very, very active. Okay? All right.
Very practice, OCD. OCD is the word. People that is that have hard time to focus and.
Oh, like ADD?
No, ADD, OCD. So they like to clean and organize too much, but ADD.
Yeah, attention deficit disorder.
They're very hyperactive people as well, right?
Right. There could be ADHD where they're also hyperactive.
Okay.
Right. So, yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, we also had the vritti that is sort of that's lack of common sense, you know, which is in the Svadhisthana chakra. That could be connected to ADD, but definitely somebody who is overly hyper. Yes, you know, there's that can be associated with this chakra, right?
Or to the coffee.
Yeah. Or to the conflict, or to the contrary.
Or to the coffee, I mean. Like,
yeah.
Like, if
Uh-huh.
you ingest too much
Raja energy, Raja Guna energy.
Raja Guna energy.
Yes. Okay, another one is Vishada. Vishada means melancholy. Okay? Melancholy, sadness. So, have you all ever experienced a sense of depression? And, I don't know, have you ever felt it down here? A sense of melancholy?
I feel not hungry.
Okay, that's interesting. That's a good connection. When people get depressed, sometimes you could lose the appetite. When somebody passes away, you don't feel like eating, you know? So, yes, and so and here, this is the one of digestion. So, melancholy, we do see associated with that. Obviously, lack of energy, sadness. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I always thought that was more in the heart, like melancholy and sadness. You know, like if I try to think, like place it where I would feel it more in the heart.
Yeah. Yeah, up here there is also one vritti, cha. Actually, yes. So there's viveka, discernment, and then yes, there's also a vritti up here that can be connected to that. Okay, it'll come back to me. Did you want to say something?
So for people that generally suffer with depression their whole life, is it like for them it's like an imbalance, or could they ever get out of that sadness if they did practice with the chakras?
Yeah. There. Actually, when you said that, it reminded me of something. I mean, one way to always strengthen the chakras is through asanas. That's why it's good to do yoga every day. If you can, every 12 hours. Work these glands, work these chakras. The vritti I wanted to say that's up here is mental numbness due to fear. Okay? There's a vritti up here. So that one can be associated with depression as well. But coming back to what Jayati just said, have you ever met somebody who just broke up with somebody, and then what do? They go home and they eat a pint of ice cream? Right? Have you ever been so depressed that all you want to do is just eat? You just eat to try and make yourself feel better, right? So that's also, see, there's a connection. When we eat, we feel good. There's a little, what are those? Endorphins, we get little buzzes. Food makes us feel good. It can cheer us up. So why? Because we feel melancholy here. We feel sadness in this part of the body, in this vritti. So that's why with food we try to make up for it. So, okay, let's go on to another one, kasaya. Kasaya means melancholy, peevishness. So kasaya means peevishness. And what I mean by peevishness is like irritability. To be irritable. All right? Now, I am guilty of this. Okay? If you ever need to talk to me, if you ever need to have a serious conversation with me, wait till after I've eaten. Okay?
Angry?
Oh, what's that word?
Hangry.
Yes. Okay. In fact, you know, my wife, she knows this about me. You know, let's talk after you've eaten, okay? Because right now you're a little funky in this discussion, okay? So yeah, you know, irritability is here, and for me, irritability is triggered when I don't eat. I mean, any irritability will be triggered when you don't have your needs met. Any irritability, you know, if but definitely when you don't eat, also when you don't sleep, okay? But food is a big one. I mean, at least anecdotally I can attest to this. What do you all think? Either on that subject or irritability being down here.
It's also, you can also see it when it's stuck in traffic.
What do you see when people are stuck in traffic?
Like a lot of road rage. Like, not in DC, but like a lot of people tend to want to honk their horn, or in New York don't want to get out of their car just to yell at someone.
Yes. So when you feel that sort of peevishness, you know, yeah, it can manifest in different ways, like road rage. The thing to test would be if in that moment you're honking that horn or you're yelling at somebody, where are you feeling that energy? If you could locate that somewhere in the body, where would it be? Would it be in your wrist? Oh, I feel it like it's here. Or do you feel like it would be here?
The gut.
In the gut. Okay. Yes. If I also feel irritable, if something is starting to tick me off, I might also feel it down there. Okay. Now here's what we're trying to say. The whole point of being aware of all of this, the whole point is so that we learn to control ourselves. I shouldn't go home thinking, yeah, I just get pissed off every now and then. Yeah, when I don't eat, I can just lash out, and hey, that's just me, right? I mean, then what's the point of knowing this? We want to be aware of our different human emotions and how they can be triggered, where they're located, how to mitigate them, so that we can control them. Okay? I just want to emphasize the point. The brittis are meant to be controlled. Yes, go ahead.
I guess this word control, like, to me, has never resonated. Because it feels like it's not authentic. It feels like I'm just stifling the emotions instead of, like, creating a new culture in myself.
Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Actually, we never want to suppress anything. We never want to suppress it. That is a recipe for disaster. We only want to, for lack of a better word, control. Okay, and maybe now we can explain that a little further. But let's look at the opposite of suppression. When you suppress an emotion. What is a good example of that? There are people who are very patient, very quiet. Like, let's say in a relationship, there could be one partner that abuses the other partner. You know, they yell at that partner, mistreat that partner, and then the other partner is always just kind of takes it. You know, maybe won't respond, maybe changes the subject, is very adaptable, but it seems like, hey, that person is cool. They control themselves, or they have a nice temper, they don't get hot and bothered so much. But no, wait. Wait a few weeks or wait a few years. One day that person will blow up. One day that person will do something you never thought they would do. They might burn your house down. They might destroy your car. So it seems like people have a high tolerance for abuse and pain, but really that's just suppression. They're just suppressing because nobody likes to be mistreated. And so that's an example of suppression, right, Alejandra? So I'm glad you brought that up. So sometimes you're absolutely right. We can suppress emotions, like suppress my sadness, like a man who never cries. Because he was always taught to be a man, to be macho, 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 macho. That's what they say in Latin America, right? When a little boy falls, they say, macho, 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 macho. Like, you know, be a man, be a man, be a man. You know? As if men are not supposed to cry. So sometimes you'll see a man who has suppressed that for a long, long time because he was socialized that way. And that suppression can make him come out in other ways. You know, he might not know how to release his emotions, let's say through tears, so he'll release them through something else that could be way more destructive. So these emotions, if we suppress them, we're not eliminating them, we're just kind of squeezing them down, and then maybe even squeezing them into another area of our lives where they will lash out. Okay? So what I mean by control is that if I notice that I start to get, for example, if I notice that I'm starting to get a little irritated about something, then I should control how I handle that. You know, I shouldn't suppress it. Maybe I should have a conversation with the person that is irritating me, or try to do something about what is irritating me. You know, oh, actually, I heard a beautiful example the other day that about a dog who is sitting on a nail, and so for example, and this connection may or may not be valid to this, but it's so for example, there was a story of a dog who was sitting on a nail, okay, and the dog was whimpering, right? And a person came up to the house and said, "What's wrong with the dog?" And the owner said, "Oh, well, it's sitting on this, it's you know, sitting on this nail." And it says, "Well, why doesn't it get up?" It said, "Well, because it's just, it's not like, it hasn't like reached the limit. So it's going to cry and whimper for a long time because it hasn't reached its limit. You know, when it does, then it will react, you know." So with the dog, and we're kind of like that as people, right? We complain a lot about things. We complain and we complain and we complain and we complain. Like you ever heard somebody who complains about their job? And they never quit their job? Like they complain every day about the same job for years, but yet they never quit that job. It's kind of like that dog, you know, you have to just leave the situation. So I think there's a connection of taking control, you know. If you suppress the anxiety you're feeling at work, the discomfort you're feeling at work, you're just going to be, that's going to seep into your life. When you go home, you're going to be miserable to your family. Instead, take control of the situation, quit the job, talk to the boss, do something else. And when we notice ugly emotions in ourselves like jealousy, we just have to learn. Okay, there you are, jealousy. I feel you down there in my belly. I know you're there. And I want you to know that you're my friend. But I'll take over from here. Something like that, you know? So we can sort of talk to our emotions in that way, right? Rather than suppress them. So it's not, maybe then I'm not controlling them, but I need to make sure that they're not going to get out of hand. So let's continue. In the time that we have, we don't have that much more time.
So is there like a I don't know, like a strategy or something to balance this chakra so that you operate at your optimum well-being, and that all of these, or are all of these anyway deemed to be coming out just by virtue of our human nature, and then it's up to us to, through the awareness and then the control to do that?
Yes. One time we said this here, right? We can never delete these emotions. You will never be able to, let's say, delete envy. Some people think they can. I'll never be jealous again, you know. I hate jealousy, so I'm going to eliminate it for myself. I'm going to just cut it out. But that would be like ripping out the little petal, and you just cannot do that. You know, it's there for a reason. So the best thing to do is to analyze how a negative emotion can have a positive quality. For example, what is a good way in which we were at peevishness, right? What's a good way that peevishness is good for us?
I mean, it makes you move forward and make change, like, you know, like you were saying, you get ticked off with your job and you quit, and therefore it's a good thing for you to quit because you go and get a job that's better suited for you. And
it was good that you got ticked off.
correct.
You were peeved about it, so you had that peevishness. Without that, you'd be in a job there forever, being exploited. You know, you'd just be like in this sort of oblivious bliss. But no, you can see a negative situation, it irritates you. Thank goodness for that irritation, or else you might never make a positive change. So I hope that also helped to answer your question, right, Claudine? That these emotions will always be there. We're just wired to have them. So we have to learn to, for lack of a better word, control them.
Make the best of them.
Yeah. All right. So Trishna. Trishna means basically a thirst for more. Okay. So the kind of like the desire to accumulate. All right.
Greed? Is that greed or ambition?
It's kind of like greed. There's another one up here in the Anahata Chakra too, called Laja. Called Lolata, and that one is also greed up here. So it is kind of like greed though, Trishna. Not being satisfied. It's like the antithesis to Santosha. Santosha is a yoga principle. It means to be content with what you have. This means a desire for accumulation, kind of like wanting more. Moha means infatuation. Have you ever had butterflies in your stomach when you look at somebody? Have you ever looked at a person and you felt butterflies in your stomach? Or is that just the thing or is that not real? Has anybody ever literally felt that?
Yeah, but that's a negative.
So you had a crush on somebody.
Right.
No, not necessarily. It's just, it is what it is, right? It means infatuation. But I'm just saying, isn't it interesting that we felt that in this area? So you're feeling it in that vritti located here. So butterflies in your stomach means you have a crush on somebody, and I don't know, some people get a reaction down there. That's connected with this. Infatuation is here. Okay? Let's go on to girna. Girna means hatred, revulsion. And bhaya means fear. Now, have you ever been afraid and you feel something, kind of a sensation in the stomach? Yes? You felt that?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, I can connect with that. I mean, fear is, fear is actually something that in Tantra, there's a special concept on this. We practice Tantra. And so in Tantra, one of our objectives is to overcome fear. So fear can be good. Like, you don't go to the edge of the cliff because of what? Fear. So it just saved your life in that moment, right? But fear can also be very, very negative. Very negative. So many things you will not do out of some irrational, some people have irrational fears, like phobias. And all of that is an imbalance of the glands that are here, the hormonal imbalances that are there when there's too much fear. And so asanas can really help us to overcome our fears. There are some yogic practices where people go and meditate in graveyards at like 2 a.m. It's called Kapalika sadhana. And that's a very, very esoteric sadhana, meditation. And they do it in a graveyard. They have to many things they have to do. They have to overcome their fear. So let's begin to close our discussion. Let's have you all maybe make some last comments. And at least we covered the different vrittis. Next week, we may make some connections to this Manipura Chakra as we talk about the Anahata Chakra. Does anybody have any last comments or last connections they'd like to make to what we discussed?
For envy,
Yes.
a dog can show envy by when a dog sees you showing love to another person, or when you come home smelling like a different another dog, that dog would be, your own dog would be mad at you because you didn't show enough affection to that dog, or you showed affection to another dog.
Yeah, I've seen that. For sure. And so it's kind of like an animal quality, you know, and this is supposed to be the chakra of our sort of mammal selves.
Like in envy also, I would say, in a positive way, sometimes we see somebody that just got a new car, really nice new car, and you go and say, hey, congratulations, what I envy, but like a good envy.
Okay.
In my country we say
Te envidio.
envidia de la buena, so
Okay.
like a good envy. But it is.
But you're happy for them?
You are happy for them. But at the same way, like I want one to, you know, I want to be like you are, but in a good way.
Yeah, sometimes on Facebook you go on vacation and you post a picture and somebody says, I'm so jealous. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right? So you're right. There could be an expression of joy there.
Yeah, they're happy for you as
Yeah.
well.
It can also inspire you to like take more actions in your own life
Yes,
to be a better
absolutely.
person.
Absolutely. So then again, motivating you to action. Kind of like that is the spirit of the Manipura Chakra, to take some kind of action. All right? So let's close with that. Thank you so much for coming.
5 more minutes at 9 o'clock.
And we will just make some quick announcements.
Thank you.
Next week we are meeting on Thursday night, I believe, not Monday. That works for you?
That's it, because
Awesome.
I'm gonna be in New York next Monday, and I was like, I'm gonna miss it.
Okay,
fourth
great. We'll
chakra.
talk about Anahata Chakra.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. And if there were any questions on the chat, we will address them via email or via message. Namaskar.
Namaskar.